Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today our guest is one of the most renowned experts on classic Hollywood stars. As you can see from the screen behind me, he has written 7 highly acclaimed books about Hollywood history and some of the most beloved celebrities. He has twice won the Bronze Halo Award for Excellence in Writing from the California Motion Picture Council. And he also maintains the most comprehensive website about Hollywood that I have ever seen. I'm delighted to welcome author, researcher, and walking encyclopedia on all things Hollywood, the fabulous Allan Ellenberger. Allan, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Harvey, for inviting me. I look forward to this.
Let's start at the beginning. How did you become such an expert on the golden age of Hollywood?
Well, I actually moved to Hollywood in 1987. And I'd always had a fascination with old movies and things like that. So once I was here, I started, I had like the Academy Library at my beck in and all sorts of locations in Hollywood. So it just fascinated me, and I went and I just started doing research with nothing in mind to do with it, just the fact that it interested me. So it just went from there. I would, go to the libraries and look at old newspapers and things like that. It just built from there.
What made you move to Los Angeles in 1987?
I was living in Wilmington, Delaware at the time, and things weren't going very well. I couldn't find a really good job, and I've always had a fascination with California and Hollywood. So in 1986, I came out for a vacation just to see if I'd like it. It just happened to be, in which I didn't plan it this way. It just happened to be the week of August 23rd, which was Rudolph Valentino's memorial service. And so I went there. It was the 30th anniversary at the time. And so I was here for a week and I enjoyed it. So I moved here then the following January.
And are you happy living there now?
Oh, yeah. I don't regret the move at all. Yeah.
When I start my day, I love a great cup of coffee to get me going. And as I'm sure you know, I love the golden age of Hollywood and the legendary stars of that era. Earlier this year, I discovered a terrific new company, Breakfast at Dominique's, that's created a series of coffee blends to honor the legacies of many legendary stars. One of my favorites is the Joan Crawford Grand Hotel blend, rich and bold with hints of nuts, cocoa, and soft spices. And there's a brand new Joan Crawford coffee called the Unchained blend, a hazelnut medium roast. There's the Boris Karloff Master of Horror blend, which is an African dark roast, and the Mary Pickford the Sweetheart blend, a French vanilla medium roast. The Harold Lloyd the Boy's Best Friend blend is a Peruvian light roast. The Ava Gardner the Goddess blend is a Sumatra Colombian dark roast. There's the Ella Fitzgerald the Jazz Club blend, a candied pecan flavored medium roast. And just making its debut on the roster of these great coffees is the Bozo the Clown the Big Top blend, a caramel corn flavored medium roast launched by the wonderful David Arquette. And I'm absolutely thrilled to tell you that very soon, Breakfast at Dominique's will be introducing the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend. It's my very own medium roast coffee, and I know you're just going to love it. Breakfast at Dominique's uses only high-quality vegan, sugar-free, and gluten-free ground coffee that's organic and follows fair trade practices, and that's important to me. Not only is the coffee delicious, it's beautifully packaged and makes a great gift for friends, especially people like me who are classic movie buffs. If you're looking for a great cup of coffee, give Breakfast at Dominique's a try. You can order any of the coffees named after some of the greatest cinematic legends, and me, at hollywoodblends.com. To tell you the truth, I even feel glamorous when I'm drinking it. Why not have a cup while you're watching our show and add a touch of Hollywood to your day?
Allan, I want to ask you about your books. Your first book, written in 1999, is all about silent film star Ramon Novarro. What was it about him that compelled you to write his biography?
I was watching TCM one night. It was on Christmas Eve, and they were having a silent night. They called it the silent night, and they were showing silent movies, and they were showing Ben-Hur. And I had never seen it before. And I watched it, and I was fascinated with Ramon Novarro and his performance and things. So I went and I wanted to find some research on him, but couldn't find anything except for what was written in Hollywood Babylon about his death. which turned out not to be that true anyway. So I just started doing my own research, and that ended up turning into the book after about 10 years of research.
In 2000, you wrote your second book, a biography of child star Margaret O'Brien, who's still with us. Why did you decide to write about her?
I met Margaret and we became good friends. And she didn't want a biography done about her. But so I suggested, well, how about a book about your films? And she thought that was great. So I interviewed her on all her films, and we did a biographical section, of course, but I interviewed her on all the films and just turned it into like a film self-book.
Has she told you what she thinks about the book?
Oh yeah, she loved it.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah.
In 2005, you wrote The Valentino Mystique, The Death and the Aftermath of the Silent Movie Idol. Now, a lot has been written about Valentino's death. What made you decide to supplement the literature that was already out there?
Well, you're right. There had been a lot of books written about Valentino, which of course included his death. But I wanted to do something different. I just didn't want to do another biography. So my book is from the point of view from his last 30 days of his life, and day by day, what he did each day for the last 30 days up until he died, and then the funeral in New York, and the viewing in New York City, and then the train ride here to California, and then the funeral here and entombment in Hollywood Cemetery. So and then there are appendices. His will is in there, and there's a lot of quotes from people who knew him when he died. And it was just a different way of looking at his life.
In 2018, you published a biography of Miriam Hopkins. Now, this book really fascinated me because Miriam Hopkins was known to be one of the most difficult actresses of all time. She fought with studio chiefs, she had a notorious feud with her arch rival Bette Davis, and she was considered terribly temperamental. What made you want to write a book about her?
Everything you just said. It was fascinating. I've always been a fan of Bette Davis, and I knew she did 2 films with Miriam Hopkins, and I heard all the stories about their fights, and they didn't like each other, and that went into more of her fighting with other people, being difficult. So she interested me a lot, and I felt she could keep me company for a few years without getting bored. But I decided I didn't want to do it if I didn't have the family's cooperation, because I needed them to fill in the holes in her life. And fortunately, I was able to track down her adopted son. They live here in Southern California, or they lived here in Southern California. And they totally agreed, and they cooperated 100%. And their grandson too, her grandson too.
Did you have to keep in mind that you didn't want to offend anybody when you wrote that book, given that the family was helping you?
I thought that in the beginning, especially about her son, but he was a very smart man. He knew exactly how his mother was and how she was perceived. Some things he agreed upon. He agreed that she was a very difficult person and could be. So it wasn't like we were telling things that he didn't know about or was offended about. It was his mother. He loved her, and he accepted her the way she was.
Were you ever able to find out what it was that caused such a rivalry between Miriam Hopkins and Bette Davis, when the 2 movies they made together that come to mind, Old Acquaintance and The Old Maid, are fabulous movies?
They are, and I think they're. In fact, The Old Maid was, I think, up to that time, was the biggest movie that Bette Davis had made at Warner Brothers. They had met on the stage back in New York 10 years earlier. But Miriam was the star then, and Bette Davis was just an ingenue. Supposedly, they didn't get along there. In Betty's autobiography, she talks about Miriam, how she would throw around. She would get out of the shower and she would just shake her blonde curls, and that's all she had to do. And then 10 years later, 1939, the roles were reversed. Bette was the big star, and Miriam was struggling to try and keep her job. In 1933, Miriam did a play on Broadway called Jezebel. Unfortunately, it was a flop. But in 1937, Warner Brothers decided they wanted to do a movie of it. Well, Miriam was smart when she started the play. She owned a part of it. So in order for Warner Brothers to be able to do the play, they had to get her permission. So she comes up to them and she says, okay, I'll sign it, but I want to play the lead. And so Warner Brothers actually just lies to her and says, oh, okay, yeah, we'll do that. Go ahead and sign it. So she signs it, believing that it was going to happen. And afterwards, they turned around and gave it to Betty, who did it, and she won an Academy Award. And Betty also had a weekend affair with Miriam's husband, Anatole Litvak. So you have all these things piling up one on each other. So Miriam wasn't a big fan of Betty's, especially when you add the Academy Award win on top of that.
Well, that does put the feud in context. I did not know that Betty Davis slept with Miriam Hopkins' husband.
Right. In fact, it happened just 6 months before they did The Old Maid.
Do you think Miriam Hopkins was underrated and underappreciated as an actress?
I do. She could be, if she had the right director, she could do marvelous work. Now, if she didn't have the right director, if it was somebody that she could manipulate, then she could sometimes be a little over the top in her performances. But when she worked with Lubitsch, she did, magical work.
Yes, she did. Have you been able to meet other celebrities in your time in Hollywood?
At one time, I met Glenn Close, and there's an interesting story behind that. I was with Anita Page, and Glenn Close was on tour for Sunset Boulevard, and she was in LA. And for publicity, they had invited Anita to come and watch the play. And so she invited me to go along with it. So we went, we had great seats. And afterwards, we got to go backstage to meet Glenn Close. And she was still dressed in her costume. And what fascinated me was she was still in character as Norma Desmond. I don't know if that's an actor's thing that takes them a while to get out of it or not, but she was still there. But she was very nice, and she talked to Anita, but she talked to her like she was Norma Desmond. So it was kind of neat seeing a real silent film star and a fictional film star together at the same time. So that was exciting.
Oh, that would be really memorable. Your latest book is about Anita Page, who started out in silent pictures and made some popular films, but her career was basically over by 1936, except for one movie in 1961 called The Runaway with Cesar Romero. What drew you to Anita Page as the subject of a book? She's almost forgotten.
When I did my book on Ramon Navarro, she had done a movie with him called The Flying Fleet back in 1929, I think. At the point that I was doing my interviews for the book, she was making a comeback in Hollywood, going to film festivals and things like that. So it was easy to find her. Her manager got me in touch with her and set up the interview. And, we just clicked and we became friends, and we would go to places together, and I'd go with her to some of the movies that she was going to, where she was hosting and things like that. I started the same thing like I did with Margaret O'Brien. I just started interviewing her whenever we were together. I'd bring my tape recorder and we'd just talk about her films and her career, the people she knew, things like that. That was 20 years ago, but it took that long to actually put it together, because there wasn't really enough for a biography, a full biography like with Miriam Hopkins, because like you said, she quit so early and she became a Navy wife. We just concentrated on the film career.
In 2008, you published a book called Celebrities in the 1930 Census. It contains household data of over 2,000 celebrities and public figures. What inspired you to write that book?
The 1930 census came out in the early 2000s. And I'm just fascinated by history, and things like that. And I got the idea that the census would have famous people in it of where they were in 1930. So I got a list of names. I thought of everyone that I could think of, and just went through and documented where they were and what they were doing in 1930 and put it all together. It's more of a reference book.
In 2001, you published a directory of celebrities in Los Angeles cemeteries, which tells you where the final resting places are of all the Hollywood stars. I'm one of those fans who loves to visit the graves of my favorite stars, and I found your book very helpful when I went grave hunting the last time that I was in LA. You wrote the book 20 years ago. Do you think it's time for a revised edition? Because a lot of stars have died since then.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's very out of date now, but no, because of the internet, the stars graves are so handy at the, going online, and it's just a lot easier. So you don't see many cemetery books anymore.
Which of your books so far has been your favorite? Do you have a favorite?
Each one, there's something I like about each one. Probably Miriam Hopkins, because I've had a lot more response from her than some of the other ones. She's made a bigger impact. I think it's brought her back to the people and her fans and things like that. And no one ever did anything on her before, but so she needed a book on the shelf for her.
Oh, for sure. Allan, I want to talk to you about your website, allanellenberger.com. That website is an incredible reference source for articles, books, reviews, newsletters, archives, so much more. I've conducted searches on your website and found loads of information about every celebrity, every movie, every event that ever took place in Hollywood from the very beginning. How did you manage to find all of the information that you've got there?
It's just research, reading books, newspapers, combing through newspapers and magazines from the 20s and 30s, and and talking to people, interviewing people. That's where all the work is in the research.
Well, how much time do you spend every week updating and adding to your website?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't had much time recently to work on updating it, because I'm working on a new book, and that takes up my time because I have a full-time job also. So I have to fit everything in when I can, and to do an article for the website, it takes a while to do the research and write it all together and things like that. So, but I'm hoping to be able to update it soon.
Do the books help pay the bills at all?
Not really. No, writing books won't make you a wealthy person, unless, of course, you hit that person like an Elvis Presley or a Marilyn Monroe or whatever.
Well, why have you chosen to write books about stars that were not really A-list?
Well, that's what I like. And whenever you write a book, you're going to spend a couple years on it. And I don't want to spend a couple years working on someone that's going to bore me. I love Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley, but doing a book on them would be boring for me. I want to do people that are fascinating, that they did something fascinating in their career, and they've been overlooked maybe, and they need to have a rebirth in their career and their face.
So your books are really a labor of love. They're not a financial endeavor for you at all.
No, not at all. They're just a labor of love. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite movie star?
I've always liked Judy Garland. I like Viola Davis. I like Drew Barrymore, and she's got the connection. And I like the women that I've wrote about. And Betty Davis, like I said, Betty Davis has always been a favorite for me for as long as I can remember. So,
Do you think you'll ever write a book about one of the Barrymores?
probably not. They've been done before. I don't want to do a book that's already been done unless it's a different angle, like with my Valentino book.
Am I allowed to ask you what your new book is going to be about?
Sure. It's a history of Hollywood Forever Cemetery and some of the people that are buried there. I've been working on that for a long time. Ever since I came to LA, I hang out there a lot. It's a nice, beautiful, I don't know if you've been there before, but
Yes.
it's a beautiful place to hang out, and it's fascinating. I always keep finding new people that not everybody would know, but obscure people that are buried there of all fields, not just in movies, but in politics and science and crime and everything.
Now, it's obvious from your books and your website that you are completely immersed in the old golden age of Hollywood. What do you think of the current entertainment business?
I used to be into it a lot, but the last 10 years or so, I've kind of lost track for some reason. At Academy Award time, I don't recognize a lot of the movies and things like that. And I don't know if that makes me getting old or what, but there are some good ones, absolutely, that are being made. I don't know that they match up to some of the older ones that still have an audience, especially like on Turner Classic Movies and things like that.
Do you think the movie industry and the Hollywood community have done enough to preserve the history of American cinema?
I believe that there are groups that are trying. The Academy is putting together a museum that hopefully will be open, but because of the pandemic, has been postponed several times. I'm more concerned about the Hollywood history here in town, that people don't have much respect for the old Hollywood. They keep tearing things down that used to be. I'm just afraid that that's all going to be disappeared within the next 50 years, that there's not going to be any traces of the Hollywood of the 20s and 30s and 40s.
Are you excited about the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures that's going to open in September?
Yeah, I am. I'm looking forward to it. This town doesn't have a Hollywood museum, which is incredible. There's been several tries to get one in town. We do have the old Max Factor building. There's a nice museum in there, but there's never been one that's totally everything on Hollywood history from beginning to end. So yes, I'm looking forward to it very much.
Are you going to connect with the people at the Academy Museum and make sure that they know about your books and your website?
Well, I've been to the library, and I always donate one of my books to the library. So and I have friends there, so they know about me, and I try to keep in touch with things that are going on there.
Well, Allan, your dedication to researching and preserving and honoring the legacy of Hollywood movies and the great stars is so greatly appreciated by fans like me who love the golden age of Hollywood. Thank you so much for coming on our show.
Well, you're welcome, and I appreciate the time and the research you've done. So thank you.
Our guest has been Hollywood historian, researcher, and author Allan Ellenberger. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer, Steve Silver. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.